Okay, now we're going to look at how we will render an object. So first thing to do is we're just going to show you how to do this in the 3D Basics workspace, and then later on we'll be moving on to the 3D modeling. But just in the 3D Basics workspace, just make sure you have that on. So we've got our home, which has all our modeling areas. And then if we go into visualize, we can see all of these elements to make our visualization. So the first thing we'll do is, what we want to do is apply a material to our various different objects. Now, I find the easiest way to do this is have a material matched with a layer. So that takes a little bit of planning beforehand so that you ensure that your layers are correctly assigned to your objects. So here's our materials browser, and we can see that we've already inserted some material. And the materials we have in here are ash door, cool white, white ash, and white ash Java. So the cool white I'm going to use for these walls here, and then the various colored ash I'm going to use for the stool. To get the materials into the drawing, if we go to our library, we can see all of these different materials. But generally I find the easiest way is to maybe do a search, timber or wood. We can search for wood. And then we would get all of the different types of wood that we wanted. So if you wanted to bring in beech, you can just drag and drop it into our materials browser. Now I want to pick a material for my floor. So let's say it's going to be a marble floor, so M-A-R-B-L-E, and coarse polish alabaster, fine polish alabaster. Let's go with the fine polished alabaster. We bring that in here, and then we just unclick our search bar, and there are all the materials that we have in the drawing now. And as I say, I find the easiest way of bringing in the materials and applying them to an object is to attach them by layer. So if we click attach by layer, then we can see what we have in here. So here are all our objects layers. So that's the top here, that's the leg, which is also ash, the rail is also ash, and then that little shoe or shim or slip at the base, I've made that a slightly different color, and that's white ash. And then if we look here, we've got the floor. So we want to give that a texture and a material. So let's drop our fine polished alabaster onto there. And we go OK. And we can see that change color. Okay, so now the next thing, if we just pan here, return, is we're going to set up our rendering. So this is just very simple rendering that we're going to do. We're just going to render it in the screen just to get an idea of what we're dealing with, and then later on we'll look at how to set up a camera. Okay, so the first thing is that when you're doing renderings, it's a good idea to always save before you do a rendering. So how do you save? Command S or Control S is how we would save. So we're going to look at how we do our render here. So the first thing to talk about with renders is the size. So when we're doing a test render, we always do it 800 by 600 SVGA. That's the SVGA is for a monitor, so it's a small monitor. HD TV is a higher resolution monitor, and a full HD monitor is that. But we just do it at that size because we just want to do a test. And then for your final renders, you'll do it at that size there, 24 80 by 3508 at A4. And they usually take a while to do. It's a good idea to save either hard save or, as shown before, or to use the save button there. Okay, so let's just do a quick render here, and this is going to render this screen here, and that's our screen rendered. Now, if we want to save that, we just press save, and that's going to save it to our drive, save, and then we'd always save it as 8-bit color with a dots per inch of 300 dpi. Now, if we want to change where the shadow is coming from, we can, the simplest way I find is just to change the date and time. So what we can see here is that our stool is aligned north, south, and then the open area is to the east, and the closed area here is to the west. So the easiest way to do things is just to do it by orientation. To have your date set so that it's the middle of June, so that gives you the longest day. And because we want the sun coming from the east, the sun rises in the east, that means we're going to have our time really early in the morning. Now, if we put that time later on in the day, say 5 o'clock, and we now render it, we can see that nearly the whole thing is entirely in shadow. Okay, so we don't want that. So we'll change that back. I'm just going to change it to an earlier time. Let's even go at 6 o'clock. See, you probably get very low sun there. Yeah, sun hasn't risen at that point. Maybe 10 o'clock. Now, that's pretty good. It's quite bright. We've got our bit of shadow there, and that would be a good one. Now, we can create lights. In general, I find that creating lights causes more problems, and unless you really want to get into incredibly detailed renders, I'm not entirely sure it's a benefit for what we're doing. I think just use the sun. That's generally the best way to do things, but to use a background. Okay, so if we don't have a background, what we can see is if we pan over here, we just have the stool on its own. And if we render that now, what we'll see is that it doesn't have anything to have a shadow cast onto. So a lot of times that gives a very sort of a poor looking render.